If you've been told that the exhaustion you feel every single day is just part of getting older, that explanation has been doing you a disservice because persistent fatigue in older adults has specific identifiable causes, and most of them have nothing to do with how much you sleep or how much you rest. Here's what that conversation usually looks like. You go in, you tell your doctor you're exhausted, not just tired, exhausted, all the time. You wake up tired, you're tired by mid-morning. You take a nap and wake up still tired. They run some basic blood work, don't find anything dramatic, and tell you it's a normal part of aging. Maybe suggest you try to get more sleep, and you leave with no real answer. That's not a diagnosis, that's a dismissal. And if that's been your experience, if you've been managing this for months or years without anyone actually explaining what's driving it, what I'm going to go through today is something you deserve to hear a long time ago. Fatigue is not just a feeling, it's a symptom. And like any symptom, it has root causes. The problem is that in older adults, those root causes are almost never singular. They stack, they interact, and because each one looks manageable on its own, the combined weight of them often gets written off as normal aging when it isn't. A systematic review published in Scientific Reports, pulling together 21 studies and nearly 18,000 participants, found that more than 42% of older adults report significant persistent fatigue, not occasional tiredness, ongoing daily fatigue that interferes with their life. That's nearly half of this population, and the vast majority of them have no adequate explanation for it. The first root cause, and the one most doctors don't explain, is what happens to energy production at the cellular level after 65. Every cell in your body contains structures whose entire job is to convert the food you eat into usable fuel. Think of them like tiny power plants running inside each cell, in your muscles, your organs, your brain. After 60, those power plants start losing efficiency. They don't break down completely. They just produce less fuel for the same effort. So the same walk that cost you a certain amount of energy 10 years ago costs meaningfully more now. The same morning routine, the same climb up the stairs. The output is identical. The energy cost is higher. This is the part that makes "just rest more" such unhelpful advice. Rest doesn't make those cellular power plants work better. If anything, extended inactivity makes them less efficient over time because they're use-dependent. They respond to demand, which is why gentle, consistent movement is one of the few things that actually improves energy production at the cellular level rather than just managing the symptom. The second root cause runs in parallel and compounds the first. After 65, the immune system shifts into a kind of low-level, permanent alert, not fighting a specific infection, just running in the background all the time at a low hum. Researchers call this chronic, low-grade inflammation that comes with age, and it consumes energy, constantly. Think of it as a program running in the background of your phone that you didn't open and can't see, draining the battery without producing anything useful. A longitudinal study, the St. Louis Personality and Aging Study, followed older adults over multiple years, measuring their inflammatory markers alongside their reported fatigue. What they found was striking in two directions. Higher inflammation predicted greater fatigue 2 years later, and greater fatigue predicted higher inflammation 2 years later. It runs in a loop. The inflammation exhausts you. The exhaustion feeds the inflammation. And neither rest nor sleep interrupts it, because inflammation actively disrupts the quality of sleep, which worsens fatigue, which worsens inflammation. The loop tightens. The same inflammatory process driving the fatigue is also driving joint stiffness and pain. The same cellular energy decline affecting your muscles is affecting your brain, which is why so many people experiencing this kind of fatigue also notice brain fog, slower thinking, difficulty concentrating. These aren't separate problems. They're the same problem expressing itself in different places. Understanding that is what changes the approach. Because if you're trying to fix fatigue by sleeping more while the underlying inflammation keeps running, you're treating the symptom, not the system, and that's why nothing seems to fully work. There are several more root causes that stack on top of these two, and some of them are genuinely surprising in how common and how overlooked they are. Root cause 3 is the one that makes me want to lean in and say this directly. A significant number of people dealing with persistent fatigue are deficient in something that a simple blood test would catch, and those tests often aren't ordered. Or they're ordered, but the results fall into what gets called normal range, a range wide enough that someone can be meaningfully deficient and still not flag anything concerning. The most common culprits are B12, vitamin D, and iron. B12 first. After 65, the stomach produces less of a compound needed to absorb B12 from food. This happens gradually, quietly, and is made worse by several common medications, including drugs for acid reflux and blood sugar management that a significant portion of this age group is already taking. Low B12 presents as exactly what this video is about: persistent fatigue, brain fog that doesn't lift, a heaviness that doesn't respond to rest. It can go undetected for years because it develops slowly and because many routine blood panels don't include it unless you specifically ask. Vitamin D operates through a different pathway but produces similar symptoms: fatigue first, then muscle weakness, low mood, and poor sleep quality, all associated with deficiency, which is extremely common in anyone who spends limited time outdoors or lives in a northern climate. Again, often not tested unless requested. Iron deficiency, and its more advanced form, anemia, affects around 1 in 10 adults over 65. The presentation is bone-tired, not just physically tired, the kind of fatigue where catching your breath after minor exertion feels harder than it should, where the body is working harder simply because it doesn't have enough healthy red blood cells to deliver oxygen efficiently to where it's needed. Worth sitting with for a moment, because this is the part that I find genuinely difficult. Many people in this situation have been exhausted for years, not months, years. They've restructured their lives around the fatigue, said no to things they wanted to do, rested through afternoons that used to belong to them, quietly withdrawn from the activities and people that made their days feel full. They've stopped taking the short trips they used to love because they're not sure they'll have the energy to manage them. They've turned down invitations, family gatherings, dinners, mornings out, not because they didn't want to go, because they knew what it would cost them afterward and weren't sure they had it to spend. They've watched their world get smaller, a little at a time, and somewhere along the way stopped fighting it because nobody gave them a reason to believe it could be different. And sometimes the reason it could have been different was a single blood test, one test that nobody ordered. That's not the fixed reality. There may be a specific, identifiable cause sitting in your blood work right now that simply hasn't been found yet. And finding it changes what happens next. Root cause 4 is one that affects nearly everyone in this age group to some degree: blood sugar instability. Even without a diabetes diagnosis, the way blood sugar rises and falls throughout the day has a direct, measurable effect on energy. A high carbohydrate meal produces a blood sugar spike. The body responds by driving it back down, often harder than necessary. The result is a crash, and that crash feels like fatigue. It feels like needing to sit down, like the afternoon just collapsing under you even if you slept reasonably well the night before. This is why so many people in this situation feel acceptable in the mornings and increasingly depleted as the day goes on. Breakfast triggers the first spike and drop. Lunch triggers another. By mid-afternoon, the cumulative effect of 2 or 3 blood sugar swings has left the body running on low fuel, and it registers as exhaustion, not aging. Blood sugar management. The fix isn't dramatic. Protein and fat alongside carbohydrates at every meal slows the glucose curve. Smaller, more frequent meals keep the swings smaller. Cutting the obvious blood sugar spikes, the sweetened drinks, the white bread, the pastries at breakfast, remove some of the biggest contributors. These are accessible changes. And for people whose fatigue has a significant blood sugar component, the shift in afternoon energy is often noticeable within a week. Root cause 5 is one that this age group, particularly women, encounters more than almost any other, and that gets missed more often than it should. The thyroid is a small gland at the base of your throat that regulates how quickly your body converts food and oxygen into usable energy. It's essentially the throttle on your metabolism. When it's running low, a condition called hypothyroidism, everything slows with it: your metabolism, your heart rate, your digestion, your thinking, your energy. The fatigue that comes with an underactive thyroid isn't the kind that improves with a good night's sleep. It's heavy and persistent. It sits on you, and it often comes packaged with other symptoms that are easy to dismiss individually: some unexplained weight gain, feeling colder than the people around you, hair that's thinning slightly, digestion that's slower, a general mental sluggishness that feels like brain fog. The tricky part is something called subclinical hypothyroidism, where the thyroid is functioning below optimal but not low enough to trigger most standard alerts. A routine blood panel typically measures one thyroid marker. If that number sits anywhere in a very wide reference range, the results come back labeled normal. But many practitioners argue that the optimal window for this population is considerably narrower than what most labs use as a cutoff, which means a person can be experiencing real, measurable symptoms of low thyroid function and be told their thyroid is fine because their number falls within a broad range that doesn't reflect their individual baseline. If the fatigue you're experiencing comes packaged with any combination of those other symptoms, the cold sensitivity, the weight, the brain fog, the slow digestion, it's worth asking specifically for a full thyroid panel, not just the single standard marker. That conversation is worth having. And then there's root cause 6, the one that catches people off guard, because it sounds too simple to be the answer. Chronic mild dehydration is a primary driver of daily fatigue in this population, and most people have no idea it's happening to them. Thirst sensation declines with age. The mechanism that tells younger people they need to drink becomes less reliable after 65. Which means many older adults go through significant portions of the day mildly dehydrated without feeling thirsty, without any obvious signal that something is wrong. And even mild dehydration, as little as 1 to 2% of body weight, produces measurable fatigue, cognitive slowing, and reduced physical capacity, not dramatic dehydration, not dry mouth and dizziness, just slightly underhydrated all day, every day, compounding everything else. The compounding matters here. Remember the cellular energy decline we covered earlier, the power plants becoming less efficient. Dehydration makes that worse. Every physiological process in the body runs less efficiently when fluid levels drop. The inflammation loop tightens, the blood sugar swings hit harder, and the thyroid works less effectively. Dehydration doesn't cause these problems on its own, but it amplifies every other cause running beneath it. And electrolytes matter as much as water volume. Low magnesium, low potassium, low sodium all produce fatigue independently of how much water someone is drinking. Someone can be drinking 8 glasses of water a day and still be functionally depleted in the minerals the body needs to move that water into cells where it does its work. The practical piece is straightforward. Stop relying on thirst as your signal. Drink consistently throughout the day, mornings and early afternoons especially. Add a small amount of electrolyte, a pinch of sea salt in a morning glass of water, or a low-sugar electrolyte supplement, particularly if activity or heat is part of your day. And notice whether the afternoon fatigue pattern shifts. For people whose fatigue has a significant dehydration component, the change often happens faster than they expect. Start with the blood work, not just whatever your doctor orders by default. Specifically ask for these markers by name, because standard routine panels often miss several of them. Ask for B12, and when the result comes back, ask what the actual number is, not just whether it's flagged. The reference range is broad enough that you can be meaningfully low and still not trigger a concern. A number above 300 is generally considered adequate. Many practitioners working with this population aim higher, around 500 or above, especially when symptoms are present. Ask for your vitamin D level. Below 30 is considered insufficient by most standards, and below 20 is deficient. Fatigue, muscle weakness, and mood changes are all associated with levels in that range. Ask for ferritin, not just the basic iron markers in a standard blood count, but ferritin specifically. Ferritin measures stored iron and is a more sensitive early indicator of depletion. Someone can have normal results on the standard test and meaningfully low ferritin, low enough to produce fatigue, and it won't be caught unless this marker is specifically ordered. Ask for a full thyroid panel, the standard thyroid marker plus free T4 and free T3, which give a fuller picture of how well the gland is actually functioning. If the only result you receive is a single number labeled normal, ask whether the other markers were included. They often aren't unless specifically requested. Ask for fasting glucose and your 3-month blood sugar average. If blood sugar instability is a contributor to your fatigue pattern, this is where it starts to show up. Write these down before the appointment. Bring the list. This isn't an unusual or demanding request. It's a comprehensive fatigue workup. And if you've been dealing with this for more than 6 months without a clear explanation, you have every reason to ask for it. Beyond the blood work, there are 3 things worth starting immediately, none of which require a lab result to begin. Move, not intensely, not for long, but consistently. 20 to 30 minutes of walking daily, or whatever form of movement your body tolerates, begins to reverse the cellular energy decline we talked about. The power plants respond to demand. They become more efficient when they're being used. This is the most counterintuitive thing about fatigue in this age group. The answer is often not more rest, but more movement, structured carefully and built gradually. Stabilize your blood sugar at breakfast. Protein in the first meal of the day, eggs, Greek yogurt, smoked salmon, whatever works for you, changes the glucose curve for the entire morning. It's not a complicated intervention, but for people with a significant blood sugar component to their fatigue, the difference in energy by mid-morning is often noticeable within days. Hydrate deliberately. Set a schedule, not an intention. A full glass of water first thing in the morning before anything else. Another mid-morning. Another with lunch. Don't wait for thirst. And consider adding electrolytes, especially if you're not eating much salt or if you sweat during any activity. These 3 things address root causes directly. They're not the whole answer, but they're the answer you can start tomorrow without waiting for lab results. Think back to the opening of this video, the doctor's visit, the blood work that found nothing dramatic, the advice to get more sleep, the leaving with no real answer. That experience is common, and for a lot of people, it's become the story they've accepted about themselves, that this is just what their energy looks like now, that this is what aging feels like, that the world getting a little smaller and a little quieter is something they just have to make peace with. It doesn't have to be that story. Persistent fatigue in this age group has identifiable causes often enough, addressable causes, measurable causes, that accepting it without a proper investigation is giving up too early. You now know what the root causes are. You know what to ask for. You know what to start tomorrow. That's enough to begin. Subscribe if this was useful. I put out content like this every week. And if you have a specific question about what we covered today, leave it in the comments. Take care of yourself.